We are making a new kind of action-adventure game. It's spooky.
In 2019, Bethesda brought one of the most memorable moments of that E3, when Evil Within developers Tango Gameworks introduced their new project alongside its creative director, Ikumi Nakamura. Nakamura would win many people over with her cheerfulness, excitement, and slight nervousness. She felt much more human than a lot of the corporate suits you usually see on stage at E3, and whatever the game was, the audience were already on board. That game was Ghostwire Tokyo, revealed through a moody CGI teaser which depicted people vanishing across the Japanese capital, and some mysterious ghostly figures wandering the streets, along with some kind of resistance movement to the supernatural events. It was a game that I was immediately interested in playing, whatever it was. The spooky Japanese setting is exactly my jam, and with a creative director so enthusiastically hyping it up on stage, I had high hopes for it. And now I've played it to the end after it released earlier this year. But what did I think of it after all that build-up? Was it as spooky as Nakamura promised? What kind of game even was it? That is what we're here to find out. Despite first impressions, Ghostwire Tokyo is not a survival horror game. Sure, it's filled with spooky elements, but it's a first-person action-adventure set in an open world. You play as a young man named Akito who is having the worst day. Not only has he been involved in a traffic collision and possessed by a ghost, but a strange mist also swoops in and spirits away much of Shibuya. Dangerous ghosts are then summoned by a man in a demon mask. Akito is determined to find his sister, who is comatose in a hospital, while the spirit inside him, known only as KK, not that one, wants his help in returning Tokyo to normal. We're then thrown into an open-world adventure set in a Tokyo deserted by all except ghosts and animals, and in some cases, ghost animals. KK provides some magic powers to battle the supernatural, while parkour and puzzle elements are thrown in for good measure. And the main thing that strikes me about Ghostwire Tokyo is how stylish it all is. Tokyo looks amazing, all shiny streets and aggressive neon signs, with signs of ghostly activity poking through everywhere. Creepy growths, eerie mist, and ghostly after-images exist everywhere, while piles of clothing that litter every street and building remind you that something truly terrible has happened here. Those first steps into this haunted virtual Tokyo are stunning, and I found myself marvelling at everything I saw. As someone who's been to the real place, it's easy to feel how wrong the situation is, as that city is anything but quiet. There's also just a ton of Japanese folklore and mythology crammed into this game, which, if you're even remotely interested in Japan's spooky side, and I am, there's more than enough to play around with here. From a variety of ghost types to hunt for upgrades, to sassy twin-tailed cat merchants now running the convenience stores, there's so much to uncover here. Missions taking place indoors also exude style in so many ways, with shifting hallways and non-Euclidean architecture bending reality as you go. Enemy design continues this trend from umbrella-wielding Slendermen to headless schoolgirls, with a few behatted scissor women thrown in for good measure. Fighting them is also fun and stylish too, with a bunch of different powers all thrown out with hand signals and movements, making it feel like you're weaving the elements together like a wizard. The game is so stylish, so full of great ideas, and so full of potential, and it's a real shame that all of that ends up being a letdown in the end. So for all of Ghostwire's undeniable style and cool ideas, it quickly becomes apparent that what you see within your first hour is basically what you'll be seeing for the entire game's runtime. I'm not joking, this is the epitome of copy and paste open world game design. The main storyline involves finding Torii gates to cleanse them and clear the fog, repeatedly, forever. And when you're not doing that, the main missions involve you travelling up somewhere high to find out where the next one might be, and so on. But surely there are other things to do along the way. Oh yeah, you can fight off the various apparitions you see in the trailers, and initially it's all very cool and exciting to see these weird enemy designs and the powers that you use to combat them. And then the game progresses, and the only variations are versions that are a little bit stronger and now wear a hat or are larger. You'll be seeing endless variations on Slendy, backflipping high school girl, and Lady Scissortrescu for the entire game. It never varies beyond this. Sometimes you'll get a fun side mission that involves tricking a Kappa into accepting a cucumber, or stalking a possessed umbrella, and that's cool and imaginative, right up until you encounter the same thing again multiple times elsewhere on the map. Collectibles are pretty samey too. Some cat merchants are street vendors looking for unique items, and collecting these basically involves rubbing up against every wall in the city until you hear a meow and the item's location nearby is dropped on your map. And then there are the spirits of humans ripped from their bodies who you can seal away in a paper talisman and then deliver to safety through the internet to an associate of KK. And these are just floating around everywhere, often in clusters that require you to keep making trips away to phone booths to clear your inventory space. And oh boy, is all of this tiresome. The same mission structures, the same collectibles, the same enemy types, it all wore me down. I didn't want to keep seeing the same stuff over and over and over again, and yet that's all I ever got. What was once stylish and spooky quickly became eye-rollingly repetitive. You start to wonder how many shortcuts were employed to make this game. Combat and exploration aren't much better. Those powers I mentioned, they go nowhere, and in fact, as the game adds increasingly large groups of enemies to fight, the lack of any real AoE attack or any real improvements in your abilities made combat begin to feel endlessly frustrating to engage in. There's also something profoundly unsatisfying about fighting these ghosts, as so many of your attacks do little to make them flinch or react. You just keep hitting them with blasts until their core suddenly appears, you perform a finisher, and then repeat. When enemies get bigger and absorb more hits, this gets even more tedious as you often have no idea how close to beating an enemy you are. And when much of the endgame is a series of these big fights in a row, it can feel anticlimactic. Movement is also painfully slow. Akito is clunky to control, and the first-person perspective does not help with this feeling. It's fine for walking through buildings or navigating the streets, but once you're in combat it feels like you have few options for evasion. Any introduction of verticality in the world is also frustrating because it feels like there should be more Mirror's Edge style parkour here, but there simply isn't. And don't get me started on the tedium you experience in the times you have to reach the top of a building by climbing a long set of stairs that loop around. The story is also not as great as the premise might suggest it could be. It's hard to really sympathise with any of the characters, as Akito, KK and the few side characters we see have so little development and so few standout moments that establish who they are. Akito wants to find his sister, KK is mysterious and won't tell Akito anything about himself, and that's roughly where the characters begin and end. The lack of other people means that there's few other character interactions, leaving you with a hollow, abandoned city with minimal characterization, and where the entire story is mostly about where the next gate is. I made it to the end of Ghostwire Tokyo, but by the end I was just trying to finish it for the sake of finishing it, to see if it went anywhere or pulled something exciting out at the 11th hour. Without spoiling too much, it did not, and the ending was ultimately unsatisfying. Ghostwire Tokyo feels like it had a troubled development. Remember when I opened the video talking about the creative director Ikumi Nakamura? She is not the creative director in the final release, as she left Tango during development only 3 months after the initial announcement. Since then, she's been on a tour of other studios to learn more about running a studio specifically so that she can open her own. So in the intervening time, other Tango team members took over, with Shinji Mikami seemingly taking the reins. He is notably the creator of Resident Evil and the founder of Tango, and previously led development of The Evil Within. And if I'm entirely honest, I didn't like The Evil Within, and that game's weird lack of direction and clunkiness appears to have carried itself into Ghostwire. But of course, any game that abruptly shifts creative directors is always going to have problems, as different directions are going to have different visions, and I feel like the objective just became get this game out the door and make sure it resembles the original trailer as much as possible. Which it does succeed at, it never really goes much further than that. I also suspect another element at play. Due to the game being announced as a PS5 exclusive and then Microsoft buying up the game's publisher Bethesda, I could see an insistence from Phil Spencer to get this game out the door to honour pre-existing contracts as soon as possible, so they weren't releasing a game exclusive to their competitor system years down the line. But if development had changed hands behind the scenes, there were likely a lot of issues yet to be ironed out, so the team just stretched out the concepts they already had and built it into the vague shape of a complete game. Obviously, this is all speculation, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was the reality. I would love to know the full story here. Because Ghostwire Tokyo is the textbook definition of wasted potential. It's a game with a ton of great concepts and ideas, it just never goes anywhere with any of them. There is an interesting story premise that mostly boils down to where is the bad guy now and how do we stop him, and there's no real examination of the supernatural goings on. There are cool gameplay concepts that just go nowhere, and a lot of cool designs that become stale from overuse. I was excited for Ghostwire Tokyo, but it reeks of being cobbled together from loose ideas without a concrete vision. Perhaps if Nakamura hadn't suddenly left, she would have fleshed those ideas out more, or some more time after her departure could have allowed the new creative lead to shape the concepts into their own complete vision. But what we actually have is the halfway point, a collection of unfinished concepts stirred together in a pot and served up haphazardly. Ghostwire Tokyo could have been amazing, but as it is, it's more of a tech demo of what the real release could like, and that's a shame. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this quick little review of Ghostwire Tokyo, and I'm very disappointed that I did not enjoy it as much as I would like to. What did you think about it if you've played it, or is this a game that you're potentially interested in and maybe you're a little bit resistant after my review? Just let me know down in the comments, and also while you're there, give the video a like and subscribe if you're new. I also have a Patreon if you want to support the channel a little bit more, and I also have some other videos on screen that you might want to watch if you're interested. But that's all for now, and I'll see you again very soon.